As soon as I mentioned the Gold Mountain living Buddha, it was as if a figure crouching, rocking, wobbling, and striding like the Jigong living Buddha appeared in front of me. It was in the summer of 1928 that I first met with this magical figure accidentally. At that time, the nationalist government had just unified the whole country, and the revolutionary tide was raging. After I left Wuhan, I stayed in Nanjing Xuanwu Lake to recuperate in the temple of the lake god. At that time, the Christian minister Xu of the Ministry of the Interior had a proposal to reform Buddhist monasteries into schools. Meanwhile, the Christian professor of China Central University, Xiao, also has a specific plan to promote education through confiscating temple properties. And that created a scandal in the whole country and shocked the Buddhism society. All the monks and nuns were anxious and unsettled, and I was very depressed. One day, I received a letter from Layman Dian Hu, a friend of mine living in Shanghai, who was studying Tantric Buddhism, saying his mother, old brother, and children currently live in a big house with a garden in Nanking City. All the family are Buddhists and have a vegetarian diet. I was invited to move in their house to live with them for a while, so that his family could have the opportunity to hear the Buddha Dharma. I was also looking for someone to talk to ease my irritancy. 2 days later, Gonglu Hu, the old brother of Layman Dian, came to receive me politely, and I was glad to have a quiet place to settle down. On the third day I moved in with the Hu family. Gonglu told me with a smile there might be another one, the living Buddha, coming to the house in the next 2 days. I asked, "Is it the living Buddha from Tibet?" He answered, "Our family has never believed in Tibetan lamas. This living Buddha is the living Buddha in Gold Mountain Temple." I had heard the story of the living Buddha of Gold Mountain, and the mention of him drew my attention. I asked, "How do you know he is coming?" He answered, "My family has been dreaming about him for the past few days, and it has happened many times in the past. Once we've been dreaming about him, he'll come. He is predestined relationship with my family, and all of our family members are converts to the living Buddha." When I heard this, I was curious and wanted to meet this amazing person. Sure enough, on the second day of the conversation, at noon, suddenly I heard someone outside the garden chanting, "Who chants Namo Amitabha Buddha?" Everyone in whose family rushed out to welcome and prostrated themselves to him. I watched outside from the window. It turned out to be a scruffy and filthy monk, acting like a lunatic. He also crawled on the ground and prostrated himself like pounding garlic. As he did so, he kept chanting in the mouth, "O Buddha, O Guanchian Bodhisattva." When I saw that situation, I felt a bit uncomfortable. It is proper for a monk to be worshipped by his followers who are at home. And there is no reason to crawl on the ground and return the salute. What an oddity. After prostrating, he laughed and walked into the house with a swagger. As soon as he saw me, he said to himself with a long ha-ha and said, "When I prostrated myself to lay people, someone thought I shouldn't. Today I met a Dharma master, so I should prostrate myself." While talking, he prostrated himself to me with a thud. I saw that he was a monk, so I had no choice but to return the salute to him. I pondered carefully about what he said, and it was clear that he knew what I was thinking and spoke to me. I was so astonished that it was beyond my expectation. I thought this monk was so unpredictable, and I should not underestimate him. The Hu family had specially arranged a place for the living Buddha to stay. But that day, the living Buddha insisted on staying with me. Meanwhile, I wanted to feel him out to see what he was all about. Whether his practice was deviant or in line with the Dharma? I immediately called the helper to bring the bed to my room, and the living Buddha pointed to a large stool and said, "That's my bed, no need to bring another bed." It turns out that the living Buddha does not sleep at night with his legs stretched out. When it was time to light the lamp, he sat on the stool with legs crossed, closed his eyes and went to meditate. Thus, the job to figure him out becomes even tougher. It was exactly the phrase. If a Zen monk does not open his mouth, gods are difficult to set about him. At night, I saw him sitting there like a clock, not moving at all. I also sat with him for a while. When tired of sitting, I stretched out my legs to practice straight meditation, and fell to sleep. In the middle of the night, it seemed that I heard him talking to himself again. Is that so? I am not the living Buddha, my name is Wondrous Virtue. If there is a living Buddha, there is a dead Buddha. Who is the dead Buddha? After a pause, he gurgled again. What's so strange about me? It's my skill to dress and eat. When I thought about these words of his, they seemed to be addressed to me. I asked him, Living Buddha, who are you talking to? He yawned and said, Good question, who? I have worn out many straw shoes, but I have not yet found him until now. Then he asked me in return, Maybe you, the Dharma Master, already know him? I also said with a teasing tone, If I knew him, I wouldn't have asked you. He laughed, and I laughed too. I think that these words of the living Buddha somewhat have a Zen meaning. He is really something, and he has skills. So I no longer look down upon him. After living with him for some time, I carefully observed the language and actions of the living Buddha, which are still the true nature of a monk, neither talking about gods nor strange things. He only advised people not to do evil, but to do all good deeds, become vegetarians, recite the Buddha's name and worship the Buddha, and to say nothing else. His unrestrained and elegant style, his purity of character, his indifference to money, and his lack of lust for his enjoyment, made me respect and believe in him. Furthermore, look at his treatment of people, which is purely compassionate and makes him more respectable. After I had lived with him for 2 months, the living Buddha left a deep impression on me. In the winter of that year, the living Buddha invited me to attend the 7-day meditation session at Gold Mountain Temple, and I stayed with him for a few days. Since then, I have been traveling in all directions for a long time, and I had few opportunities to meet with the living Buddha until the spring of 1931, when I organized a Buddhist tour in Beijing to lead a delegation to India. When I passed through Myanmar, I met the living Buddha at the Dragon Flower Temple in Yangon, but I only stayed in Yangon for a few days because our group was in a hurry to catch a ferry to India. In those few days, I've known a bit more about the living Buddha. When I came back to Yangon in 1936, it had been more than 2 years since the living Buddha had passed away. These are the reasons and circumstances of my encounter with the living Buddha.